Hi, everybody. Happy Thursday. Welcome to today's live stream. I think we have some pretty darn good stories to discuss. I'm excited to go over them with you. The lag on this is so slow. Have I gone live? Yes, there it is. YouTube is just so behind on the lag. Okay, all right. So, it's like a minute delay. Oh, wow, that's so generous of you, X-Men Superfan. I always appreciate it. You're so generous. Thank you so much. All right, so it's pretty busy this week. I think that I'm just kind of frustrated. You know, I really wanted to cover Wednesday season 2. I think that's not going to work out, to be honest with you. Hey, Zay. I think, like, you know, when I asked you guys what you'd like to see covered in today's live stream, you made me realize that, you know, I have a lot of other videos I need to get to. And so I need to focus on catching up to next week. And so I think that, you know, and I watched those Wednesday episodes for nothing now. So that's, I mean, they were very good. So that's frustrating. So what's coming out this week still is the Peacemaker breakdown tonight. Hey, Jordan. And then also, I love you too, Andrew. I love your badge. I love it. And then also tomorrow I will put up my review of the paper, even though it's ridiculously late because I already filmed it. And so I want to get it up. And I'm very proud of it. I think I had some interesting observations. So try again next week. And then also this week I really wanted to prioritize getting live streams back up and running. So I'm not going to tell you it's next week because then if it doesn't come, then you feel disappointed. So you'll just have to be surprised. And I'm all in on these breakdowns for Peacemaker and Alien. That's why sometimes I don't cover shows because they take up so much time. And then, you know, once I'm committed, and it takes time away from other videos, you know, because it's just such a time-consuming endeavor. But I'm going to finish covering Peacemaker and Alien. Pi, I love your enthusiasm, but you're super distracting. Where is White Lotus season 4 going to be? Hey, Bubbles, just tell me. Pi, come on. Gonna have to go frickin' look it up myself. Okay, hold on. Pi, you're killing me. There is no location. Okay, so somewhere in France. Oh my God. You see, there's no reason to disrupt everything for like somewhere in Paris. Okay, somewhere in France. Like, we don't even know where in France it's going to freaking be, man. I mean, France is very different depending on where you are. Okay. So, yes, it's France, but they don't know where in France. It could be in Paris. It could be in the south of France. There's lots of other places that it could be. They have not said where exactly it's going to be. It'll be at a Four Seasons, but we don't know which one. Okay, so yes, let's get to today's stories, all right? I'm in a little bit of a bad mood. I'm going to try and get out of it, but I'm really frustrated that I'm just so behind this week. It's just very, very frustrating. Okay, I'm glad you enjoy Frustrated Grace, Marky Mark, because, you know, you're getting her. Okay, all right, so we have 3 stories to go over today. Please, for the love of God, keep your comments and questions to the story at hand. At the end of the stream, when it's an Ask Me Anything portion, then you can ask me anything that you would like. Okay. It's okay, Pi. I know you get very excited about stuff, and I appreciate your enthusiasm. Okay. I saw a tweet where someone said, I screen grabbed it because I have a friend who's going through a similar situation. We were actually just commiserating on it the other night. So someone said, how do you guys handle a full-time job, going to the gym, prepping all your meals, hanging out with friends, visiting family, and keeping your place clean and tidy without going insane? And I was like, sounds pretty accurate. I mean, that's how I feel. It's just really difficult. Okay. That's right, as if. I'm sorry to make you see me like this, but I kind of am like having a rough week. And I think this thing with my eyes, I'm sorry that we're having a little bit of a side thing here, but this thing, I'm sorry, I feel so bad. But like my eyes are really bothering me. I have not been able to fix it. My insurance won't cover the medicine I need for my eyes, so I might have to just pay for it. And it's just, I think that's really thrown me for a loop. Okay, all right, so we'll see what happens. All right, so, and yes, the delay is nuts on YouTube. You guys are like a full minute behind me, and that's also frustrating. I am super stressed. I could not be more stressed. All right, adulting is hard pie. All right, here we go. Hold on. Story number 1. Someone the other day was like, okay, hold on. Boop. Someone the other day was like, I think you're being too nice to James Gunn. Well, here we go. Okay. So, thanks, Zay. I appreciate the chicken nugget money. Maybe I'll treat myself tomorrow. That's very sweet of you. I'm trying to eat a little bit better. So today I had an apple and I had some tuna fish and crackers. Thanks, Donner. So that made me very happy. Okay. Maybe tomorrow it shall be chicken nuggets. Okay. All right. So, Man of Tomorrow. No hype. That's the headline. Let's get to it. Okay. So yesterday, as we did, I did an entire freaking live stream for this. I did a whole hour live stream on the Man of Tomorrow announcement that it was the sequel to Superman. Now, there's some kind of thing going around saying that James Gunn said it wasn't the sequel to Superman 2, but I have not been able to find, thank you, David, thanks, Carrie. I have not been able to find, I went to Threads and I went to not only James Gunn's account, but apparently the person who asked him the question that he responded to, and I saw absolutely nothing there. Guy Ty, god damn it. You can't even let me enjoy chicken nuggets? Thanks, Maria. That's really very sweet of you. All right, let's focus on the story, okay? So, really big deal. I mean, it's a big comic book announcement, right? You would think that it would be a very big deal. And I saw very, very little attention paid to this yesterday. It wasn't as big a story as you would think for like a huge DC announcement. So I have a couple of theories as to why I think that might be. Okay? So, week after Labor Day. Whoa, as I said, what a shit show this week has been. I think I'm feeling it. I think it's weird that Hollywood released absolutely nothing for 2 weeks at the end of August and then decided all of a sudden, okay, congrats, Barbara. I love your new badge. And it did trend, but I mean, as some of you have pointed out, thanks, as some of you have pointed out, you know, sometimes things trend, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Alien Earth trended. Peacemaker trended week 1. I don't think it's done particularly well. I just didn't see a lot of excitement. You know, I think for those of us who cover this stuff, we can tell when there's like when you feel that energy. And it just didn't materialize. All right, so I feel, I'm all over the place. Just let me take a drink of water. Okay. So here's the thing. We'll get there, I don't care, Bear, but I kind of agree with what you're saying. So it's the week after Labor Day, right? Post-holiday, work and school, everybody's getting back up into the grind. And so I think people are distracted this week. Then, for some reason, Hollywood decided to just flood everything at once. You know, I saw a really interesting quote in the Hollywood Reporter, I think it was. They did an article, just like we discussed on Sunday, about how Hollywood is freaking out that their movies aren't doing well. And one producer said that there might be more content than there is an audience. And I thought that was a very, very astute observation that, and this person said, just like we've been saying, that less people are going to the movies more often, which I've identified as movie theater subscribers. Like AMC A-List, Regal Unlimited, they go twice a week now. They can go a lot. Thanks, Loy. And so I think that's like your new target group. And I don't know how that's working in terms of rev share because we're only paying for one ticket a month, basically. But so this person said, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, but this producer or executive said, and it seems a lot of people in Hollywood feel the answer is to make even more content. But I even said this also the other day. I said audiences used to be more on the same page because there used to only be one page to be on. I bet you that a lot of you are all watching different stuff right now. And so that's what makes it so frustrating. I'm sure some of you binged Wednesday right away. I'm sure some of you are going to wait till the weekend. It's like, and that's the problem. As good as a binge is, at least with the weekly release, everybody's watching it together. And I feel like this week you've already have Wednesday season 2 part 2 coming out. The Paper dropped the entire season yesterday. Now the NFL, that's right, Sean. The NFL just is kicking off this evening. And so how do you stand out? Tron released a trailer earlier today, or, tickets went on sale. Crickets. The Bone Temple trailer dropped. Nobody freaking cared. It's just really, really tough. And so I think that this wasn't a great space to make this announcement. I think that James Gunn did it to help Peacemaker, but I think it just ended up making everything look weaker. So let's talk specifically why it might be an issue for this announcement. All right, lack of info. Well, I think, it's interesting, Big League Chew, you said some of this stuff was trash. I think quality is another big problem. I was talking to some friends of mine, and they wanted to go to the movies over Labor Day weekend, but they didn't like any of the movies that were playing. And so they were like, I really want to go to a movie this weekend, but there's nothing to see. And so I think one of the reasons that people are going and seeing older films in theaters is because they know they're good. Because they're classics for a reason. So people are like, well, I know that if I I went by the Paris Theater again the other day, that it was a huge crowd spilling out. And I was like, what did they go see? They were watching Ghostbusters from the 1980s. And I was kind of energy that was palpable and that you never see anymore for new movies. Okay, so with Superman, I think lack of info. What is this? What is Man of Tomorrow? Is it a Superman sequel? What story is he basing it off of? I think that it's too vague of a title. Man of Tomorrow is just, it would be as if you mentioned a new Batman movie called The Dark Knight. I think that that's like one of the issues. So I think lack of information was a big one. There was very little information. And that's the problem when James Gunn writes and directs everything. What's the article going to be? Like, what are we going to talk about? We talked about what the film could potentially be about. But, when you look in the trades, they're like, he's making another one. So I think that is like a real issue. X-Men Superman fan says, Deadpool and Wolverine was the only comic book film last year to make $1 billion. Yeah, we're not talking about comic book box office right now. We're talking about this announcement specifically. All right, then lack of new. It's Superman and Lex again. He didn't even announce a new villain. Like if he had announced Brainiac, that would have set off a ton of discussion. What would the Brainiac story be? Who is Brainiac? Who could we be casting as Brainiac? Etc., etc., etc. When you just say, hey, it's the two guys back again, one of them might be wearing a battle suit, I think, again, that creates, it just stops the conversation short. So I think that's one of the things that also didn't help. Then, it pains me to say it, but I wonder if it was because they made the announcement with comic book art instead of art for a film. So they released 2 images, okay? 3 images. The original that they had James... I feel bad because a lot of comic book people were super excited that he used comic book art. But I think James Gunn needs to realize that a lot of people don't read comic books and they're never going to read comic books. I think some people feel, and I've been there because I'm a comic book fan, that they feel like, hey, if we went and we told people to read comics and they actually got a chance to see what they were all about, maybe they'd read them. And I got to tell you, I've tried. And the people who don't like comics don't like comics. There's just nothing you're going to do to fix it. You know, people know comic books exist and they either read them or they don't. They do not need to like get people more to know, especially now that they're available on digital. There's no reason to not read comic books. So I do believe that the comic book art was a big problem, you know? Like one of the people, I saw some people who were online doing coverage with AI fake versions of what Lex might look like in his super suit. And people were interested in those, even though it was a total lie and it wasn't at all what it was going to look like. But people were like, "Oh, look, it's an AI version of Nicholas Hoult in a power suit," even though that's not what it's going to look like at all. And people were like, "Ooh, cool!" Like people want the actors. So maybe he could have released some concept art of what this battle suit could have looked like. I mean, the guy's 2 years out. I mean, I'm sure he doesn't want to get locked down to what the battle suit is going to look like already. But I feel like that maybe hampered people's interest in it. You know, like what's the image that's going to go with the announcement? This comic book art. And I just feel that that's an issue. You know, Donner says, I think a lot of people, you said you think a lot of people didn't really love the movie. Well, I think that might be true to a degree. I loved it. I thought it was incredible. But, you know, I went with my family to see it while we were on vacation. And I have to tell you that while my dad hated it, and then the other members of my family, they liked it, but they didn't love it. You know, they much preferred Rocket and Groot over in Guardians of the Galaxy. So they thought it was pleasant, but they weren't like, when's the next one? So that might be a factor too. You might be right there. Then another thing I think is, you know, is it just too much James Gunn? I talked about this with my Peacemaker review. I like what he's doing, but it's a lot, and it's only James Gunn. I mean, other talent is coming, but they, as I said before, they can't get here soon enough. And so I think that people are like, it's it's more of the same. You know, it doesn't feel like, oh, here's a new director, here's a new writer. You know, you feel like there's something new coming. And I think that's another issue as well. Then another potential issue is perhaps there's just too many comic book movies. You know, like people are tired of them. And like we just had a bunch of them come out that only did mediocre business. Maybe that's not the time to announce yet another one that's an extension of one of the people just saw. You know, I think that might be an issue as well. So we'll see. But I think that's a problem a little bit there. Okay. Then, this is a big one, which I think is really interesting. The defeat of the Snyderverse. The whole time that Superman was coming out, I think people felt that it was going to be a referendum on the Gunverse. And a lot of Snyder fans were working very hard to make it a negative one, you know, that would at least affect some change. But I saw a lot of people yesterday when this announcement was made have kind of like a defeatist quality to their reaction. They were like, this is just the world we live in now, and at least for a couple of years. And so I think that the discourse, the fighting between the Gunn fans and the Snyder fans might have really driven a lot of the online discussion for James Gunn's new DC universe. And so when half of that just says, forget it, then you just have the Gunn fans left talking to themselves, right? So I think that is potentially another problem. You know, I think Snyderverse, you know, I think people do care about the Snyderverse still. I think people really liked that. I think they're kind of like, you know, it's funny, Tyler, you say they're both unhinged. I think they're both extreme, that's for sure. But I think like they're the most passionate, and I think that the problem is that nobody, as it was just said earlier, everyone else is only kind of meh. So either you're super excited or you're super against. You know, I just feel like the group talking about DC has suddenly shrunk. And that's surprising. And I think I'm curious to see what happens going forward. See, as you can see, people here still care very much about the Snyderverse. I think it's not just that Snyderverse specifically, but I think they liked Zack Snyder's darker, more epic and grander approach to the material. And knowing that they're going to have to do like a couple of years of this cutesy, funny stuff, I think is going to be difficult for some people. You know, I mean, I said that even though I loved the Superman movie that James Gunn did, I said that it was a very, it wasn't what DC has been famous for all these years. DC has always been the antithesis of Marvel content. Darker, grander, more epic. And when you take that away, it's just more Marvel. And I think, what's left? I mean, we'll see. Again, we'll see. We have to see what happens. It's very early days. But I was really caught off guard by the lack of interest in this announcement. I thought it was downright shocking. All right, so so that's my thoughts on this. So now it's the Q&A. So you can ask me anything you'd like about this story particularly. Big League Chew says, it's so hard to tell with the bots what is even real discourse. James was onto something with those monkeys. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but I do believe that bots are in play on every subject matter. Elon Musk vowed to get rid of bots when he took over Twitter and, rebranded it X. But I have to say, I think that bots are worse than ever. And I also, I have my DMs open because that's how I get a lot of my scoops and stories sometimes. I have my sources, but sometimes, I'll get a surprise, and also it's a good way to connect to people. So I really like keeping my DMs open. But I've gotten like so many ridiculous spam DMs. It's like, and I'm constantly reporting them to X, and I feel like it's pointless. Thanks, Bubbles. That's very sweet of you to say. Steven says, you want a new cinematographer for James Gunn? Well, let's see. But you want the movies to look similar. I think he's in a difficult place because while the movie didn't do well overseas, it did extraordinarily well domestic. And he's not going to want to lose that. X-Men Superfan says, shouldn't have waited till he had another thing to announce like Wonder Woman. I think he's really trying to help Peacemaker, to be honest with you. We don't know what Peacemaker's viewership is right now because it hasn't hit Nielsen yet. But I don't think it's going to be good out of the gate. But to be fair, I don't think Alien Earth is going to be good. I hope I'm pleasantly surprised. We're about 2 weeks away from getting numbers on Alien Earth. Pi says, I just think it's superhero fatigue that's affecting both DC and Marvel heavily. And that's why you're seeing people lose interest in Man of Tomorrow. That's very possible. Reese says, with regards to James Gunn, Reese has become disinterested with his style of direction. I think he's best with restraint. Him having carte blanche in his projects leads to overstuffed, forced comedic value. Well, I told you I really liked the Superman movie. But at the same time, it's not performing, I think, as it should necessarily. Xenomorph, I'm so glad you got gifted a membership. That's fantastic. Oh, for me, it was one of the ones that I gifted. That makes me very happy. Eric says he should have announced it at New York Comic Con. That would have been nice, but I don't even think they're presenting at New York Comic Con, are they? Let's see here. And then Aaron says, I think Zach handled visual effects and the fight scenes a lot better. Feora fight alone, that was an amazing fight. I remember the Feora fight in Man of Steel. But let's not pretend that Zack Snyder didn't have a lot of problems as well, If only they could merge. Speaking of the merge, Tyler says, just want to say I've missed BTT and the lives. Work has been stressful these last 2 weeks. I'm sorry to hear you're stressed too. And these give me a nice chuckle during the day. I'm so glad. I'm sorry that there was a break. But yeah, live streams are back, baby. They're back. Let's see here. Beyond the Reef says that you haven't watched Superman yet because you don't want to watch R-rated TV mature stuff. Superman's not R-rated. It's very clean, that movie. Peacemaker. Don't watch Peacemaker. But yeah. Let's see here. Thanks, Rogue Frogger. Let's see. Quaddy says, I'm excited for the movie. That's great, Quaddy. I'm excited too. I thought it was going to be a really big announcement yesterday. Maria says, if comic book movies are going, are there any genre movies going up? Well, video games, hopefully. Let's see. Steve says, I feel like telling stories of unknown heroes would be a nice move. I don't know. That's really tough. I think it's better to launch them in somebody else, like the way that he handled Mr. Terrific, which turned out to work really well. Let's see here. And then Jordan says, I think Gunn will use Brainiac as DC Thanos. Oh, I don't know if that would work. Let's see here. Ian wants a poll for your favorite comic book movie this year. Sure, why not? Let's do it. All right, let's see here. We'll do them in the order of release. Captain America 4, Thunderbolts, Superman, and then Fantastic Four. All right. And by the way, anybody who's watching can vote in the poll. You don't have to be a member to vote in the poll. Let's see here. And then X-Men Superman says, do you think Amanda Waller will take back Argus? Viola Davis is sorely needed. Well, she's supposed to have her own series, if that ever happens. I haven't seen the last 3 episodes of Peacemaker, so I don't know what's going to happen. Let's see here. Floppy disk says, can you please, I don't have to, I'm so frustrated. I spent 4 hours watching Wednesday, and I didn't get a chance to, freaking cover it. It's just very frustrating. Okay. So I'm not going to go back and watch. I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't have the time. Let's see here. I'm glad you like the Armor Suit Hero creator. Let's see here. And then Superior Shagari says, what would it take to unite the DC fandom? I'm not sure. I think a break, and then, James Gunn is such a big personality, and I think it's becoming more about him than it is about the work. And that's a tough call. I like what he's doing. So, I still find it a little bit frustrating sometimes, even though I love what he's doing. But let's just see let's see. Thanks, CM. Chandler Clemens says, I think Brainiac made the messages from Superman's parents. Oh, you think? I don't know about that. Ben 10, I do agree the merge would help, but I really like that Nate Man. He looks so much like Batman, it's ridiculous. And Darker 2 says maybe James Gunn should go offline. That's not a bad idea. And not give so many interviews or refuse to talk about other projects. I think that, he's been promoting Superman and then Peacemaker right back to back. And every time he does an interview, he ends up talking about his grander plans for DC because, that's very telling. When journalists do that, it's because they think that what they're asking you about won't get enough clicks. So they should just say, publicists can say, do not ask me about anything beyond this project. So I think that would maybe be helpful as well. I think the merge would help because it would have Gunn and Reeves, and I think it would not make it just about one person. And I think that's a big part of what's so appealing about the merge. He doesn't only talk about his projects, Denzel. He talks about other films and the projects that he's working to get going and stuff like that. Ben 10, David Cornsweet wasn't at all famous, and he worked out great as Superman. And then we'll just do a few more of these questions here. That's right, Tim. They do need a great director for Wonder Woman. I agree. X-Men Superman fan says, would you rather have Wonder Woman be released sooner rather than later? I don't know. I don't even know if we're going to continue with this, to be honest with you. Let's see here. JF, that's a great comparison. People love the Spider-Man set pics, but that was actual pics from the movie on set, and I think that speaks to the problem with the comic book situation, releasing comic book images. What was your favorite comic book movie this year? Okay, 45% of you said Superman, although I would actually agree with that. 26% of you said Thunderbolts. 25% said Fantastic Four, and only 2% said Captain America 4. That's very interesting. There's still a lot of Marvel fans out there. It's like 50-50 basically still. All right, I think we're ready for the next story. Nacho says David Cornsweet was Ryan Murphy famous. Kind of, but like in a bad way. Like he was really bad on the Ryan Murphy shows, in my opinion. Okay, all right, let's go to the next story of the day. Let me get my arrow. Story number 2. Boop. Okay, so you might have seen yesterday, there sure was a lot of drama about the Wuthering Heights breaking stall. You got to ask me those during the Ask Me Anything portion of the stream. All right, the Wuthering Heights drama. All right, so this poster and trailer came out yesterday. We're going to talk about it, give you an idea of the drama, what's going on. So we've got Emily Bronte. Did I boop? Did I boop? Boopity boop, boop, boop. So Emily Bronte versus Emerald Fennell. It doesn't look like Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, that's for sure. And then I'll try to explain to you what the issue is. So to me, I saw a movie that was definitely trying to follow in the footsteps of other movies. It's not really its own thing, so we'll see how that works out for them. It reminded me a lot of Saltburn, which also starred Jacob Elordi. And it was Emerald Fennell's last movie. By the way, Margot Robbie produced Saltburn and is the producer of this. Margot Robbie has, in fact, produced all of Emerald Fennell's work, and Promising Young Woman was the first one. So Saltburn, I think Nosferatu, it definitely looks like it's trying to borrow heavily from Nosferatu. And even White Lotus, this exotic, kinky kind of a situation. So I think it definitely seems like it's inspired by those. Not exactly what you would expect from Wuthering Heights, which is, of course, this famous classic novel by a Bronte sister. All right, but then I think you also have to remember that Margot Robbie wants an Oscar. She's already got tons of cash thanks to Barbie. Now she wants the gold. And I think that this is, she's very much, I think, following like Emma Stone. So this does remind me of Babylon, her last attempt at an Oscar, which went horribly wrong, ruined the career of Damien Chazelle. And this seems very similar in that regard. A modern approach to classic Hollywood, very poorly received by audiences, but it reminds me of that. Also, though, I think that they're trying to do a Yorgos Lanthimos, which has won Emma Stone, not one, but 2 Oscars. I think that's right, Quady. I don't think Margot Robbie's going to get an Oscar either. I think that Margot Robbie needs to realize that she is not Emma Stone. Emma Stone has an extremely different image than Margot Robbie. And I think that Margot Robbie, I think that she's a wonderful actress in the right role. I think she's very talented. I think she's a risk taker, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But what I would say is that I think that Emma Stone, yeah, she has 2 Oscars, and I'm sure that's very frustrating to Margot Robbie and a lot of other actresses. But I would say that Margot Robbie wouldn't win an Oscar. Like, that's right, Begonia. Everyone's talking about Emma Stone for Begonia. I was just talking to somebody about this. I was like, how many Oscars can Emma Stone win? And my friend was like, maybe 3. Is Emma Stone the new Meryl Streep? I mean, Emma Stone, by the way, just so you know this, Emma Stone is not only a very talented actress who chooses really interesting projects, but Emma Stone is a really strong networker in Hollywood. Emma Stone works so hard to make friends and to support other people. Every time you see her at an award ceremony, she's like the belle of the ball. She's going around hugging everybody. She produced Jesse Eisenberg's movie that Kieran Culkin just won for. I mean, that's a big part of why she's winning a lot of Oscars as well. And Margot Robbie just isn't that person. And that's okay. Not everybody can be, you don't want everyone to be the same. We already have an Emma Stone. But I would say that I wouldn't think that Emma Stone, I would think, does Emma Stone, who comes from a wealthy family? That'd be interesting if that's true. But anyway, I think that, Emma Stone was nominated for The Favorite. Oh, thank you for that correction, Ahmed. But I think what's important, as for Margot Robbie winning an Oscar, I don't think that'll happen until she's much older. That's what I would predict for Margot Robbie. I mean, I think she should be careful about having too many flops to her name. And I think this movie is downright offensive in many ways. But although I hated Poor Things, and everybody loved it, and it got an Oscar, tons of Oscars. But I think that Margot Robbie should focus on doing, I think like the Attack of the 50-Foot Woman that she signed on for is a great project for her. I think that Margot Robbie should just focus on being a big star right now, this, very, very sexy actress, that we haven't had for a long time. And good for her. And, there are lots of very beautiful actresses. But I think that Margot Robbie just has she has a more commercial image. That's the way I would describe it. Margot Robbie is very commercial, in the way she looks. Even when she's doing a serious film, she's just very mainstream and commercial. She doesn't have a quirkiness factor to her. I mean, she played stereotypical Barbie for a reason, and she was great at it. She was a great Harley Quinn, but one of the things that worked about her Harley Quinn is she made Harley Quinn less quirky. So I think that you're not going to see Margot Robbie winning an Oscar until she gets older, and then she addresses that. And then probably that's what she would end up getting an Oscar for. That's just my opinion. All right, so let's talk about this movie itself and why people are talking about it. So I do think that it's clever in some ways. Now, this poster, for instance, is a take on Gone with the Wind. Not only is it an exact pose, but it reminds me quite a bit of the posters that they make today for classic films when they put them on streaming services. They cut out the faces of the stars, and they then put a white background behind it, and they're like, look at this old classic film. So as someone who likes classic movies, I kind of thought that was interesting. I liked that, so I think the poster to me is interesting. It really does. They're trying to make it seem like you've discovered an old classic film that, but I mean, the movie itself isn't anything like that, but that's kind of what they did with the poster. So I kind of like that. Although Gone with the Wind is an incredibly problematic movie. I mean, it does exist in a time. I think Gone with the, Gone with the Wind is, I think, a well-made film, and it reflects the time period within which it was made. But its depiction of slavery is truly appalling. There was that big brouhaha a couple of years ago when they slapped that warning on the front of Gone with the Wind, and a lot of people got really upset about it. And so I rewatched Gone with the Wind, and then when I saw the way that when I was reminded of how it depicted slavery, I was like, yeah, there's no defending this. This is, pretty bad. So I wouldn't throw Gone with the Wind in the trash, but that's why I think the warning on the front of it is a good thing, to talk about, why the film was made the way it was and what it gets wrong and what's offensive about it, but yet how it still speaks to not only the time that it depicts, but the time in which the movie was made. All right. But it's crazy that Emerald Fennell would reference this, okay, because her movie has a lot of similar issues. All right, so let's go over that. A lot of you feel very passionate about Gone with the Wind. All right, so let's talk about this trailer. I have some screen grabs here. Where did it go? There it is. That's the original Gone with the Wuthering Heights. Well, the most famous movie to this point. All right, so hold on. So let's work our way through this. All right, where's my arrow? Okay, so the trailer, as you can see, it's extremely modern. It's a modern, artistic, avant-garde take on a classic story. So I do think that some of the visuals are quite striking. Yeah, like you're like, yeah. I mean, it reminds me of walking through a modern art museum. Like recently, I went to the Tate Modern in London. A beautiful museum, horrible exhibits. Like just really, whoever books the exhibits at the Tate Modern is not good at their job. But occasionally, I would come across something where I was like, all right, that's pretty interesting. But there was like no like connectivity to it. So that's kind of how this seems to me so far. I'm like, oh, that's kind of a good idea. And I kind of like that. But it gave me the impression that the trailer was just trying to be cool. And it had no, like, for instance, I found a way to bring up Barbie yet again. So if you talk to Greta Gerwig about all the choices that she made in Barbie, Greta Gerwig, as I've seen her do many times, can walk you through each single choice and why she made it and what she's referencing in movie history, in Barbie history, in her own personal history, in society history, cultural history, gender history, etc. Like, it's really, really impressive. And that's one of the reasons I thought it was so offensive she wasn't even nominated for Best Director. I suspect that if you were to ask Emerald Fennell about this, she would just say, because it looks cool. And you'd be like, that's what I suspected. I guess the point is I see no meaning here. And you can tell when an image is fraught with meaning or when it's an empty, meaningless image. Now, I think perhaps the most offensive thing about this is the whitewashing. Now, this is a very old story, obviously. And over the years, it's been adapted. And only recently have people started to actually acknowledge that Heathcliff is supposed to be a character of color. It's very clearly laid out in the books that he is a character of color. If you go and you even just look at the Wikipedia page, they have quotes. Clearly, Emily Bronte, I mean, it's a basic setup for those of you who don't know. Awais asked me what this movie is about. In the movie, this man, the father of Margot Robbie and her brother, brings home a boy who is Heathcliff that he found in the streets when he was going about his business. And he brings him home to work for the family. But he's a very charming and charismatic young man, Heathcliff. And Kathy kind of falls in love with him, but it's like a torturous situation because they can just never be together. And, over the years, it's been depicted because it's a class situation. And it is class, but also it's because of the time period and racism. So that is like the other aspect to why Kathy and Heathcliff can't be together that's not really ever touched upon. And I think as stories get more modern and we move forward in Hollywood, you would think that you would finally be able to tell the story correctly rather than retreat and be even more regressive than recent entries. So the most famous version of the movie, 1939 maybe or something like that, I think it's Merle Oberon is Kathy, and Heathcliff is played by Laurence Olivier. Now, I think with Laurence Olivier, they tried to say he was like a gypsy. Okay, so that was as far as they were able to go. And he's somebody who eventually comes up in the world, but he still is not totally accepted because of who he is. And that really, I think, points a lot to him being a character of color. So the fact that Jacob Elordi, I can't believe Jacob Elordi took the role. That's what I think. And I can't believe that Margot Robbie was okay with it. I can't believe that neither one of them was like, wait a minute. And you might say, well, Jacob Elordi could perhaps be Romani, right? I mean, Jacob Elordi has spoken to the fact that he does come from a certain group, I think, of Spanish heritage. But I mean, come on. I just, I don't think it works. I think that especially when you read the quotes in the book, where I think they make references to Africa and India, and I think apparently also it even seems to be hinted at that Heathcliff is of mixed race. So that was one of the things that, makes him kind of hard to place in this period, like society didn't know what to do with him. And that's very interesting. And I think there's a lot that could have been explored there. But instead, it's just Jacob Elordi sticking his fingers in stuff. Like, that's what it seems to be. Like, if you watch the trailer, you're like, wait a minute. So, yeah. And that's right. I don't think both of their casting works at all. Margot Robbie is a lot older than Jacob Elordi, which is also kind of weird. It doesn't fit with the context of the story. One of the reasons they get along so well is that they're supposed to be so close to the same age, even though he's technically a servant in the household. All right. So, yes. Yeah. I think because of the time period, Emily Bronte couldn't come right out and say the ethnicity of Heathcliff, but she made it glaringly obvious in the way she describes him and has other characters talk about him. So, yes. So, it seems that the other interesting question that came up is romance versus passion. Aaron Pierre is an interesting casting choice. He'd be very interesting, I think. He'd be actually very good. He's a very good choice for this. Although, I don't know if I'd want him to be in it because I think it's missing the important commentary of the book. But he would make a good Heathcliff for somebody else. So, romance versus passion. One of the things I want to say is that I've watched this 1939 film because I was like, Wuthering Heights is such a famous story, I might as well go and check it out. So I watched it, I think only in the last year or so, right? And, it's not a very romantic story. I made myself snoot. It's not very romantic, okay? It's a torturous romantic situation between the two of them. Neither one of them is ever having a good time. It's like a really sad story, okay? And I think they really never really totally were together. They never scratched that itch, which I think is that creates the longing, that's right, it's a tragedy. So the fact that it's been turned into this dear penthouse letter, right, or dear Playboy, is kind of weird. It's a really sad story where they're both so mean to each other. It's weird if you're familiar at all with the story. That's why people are like, this doesn't look anything like Wuthering Heights. So, see, Maria agrees. It's very depressing. It's a very depressing movie. So, I do think there's longing and attraction at play, but I think it's a longing and attraction that neither one of them can act on. And I think that's why it's so important to have the elements, all of the elements there, so that you can show why that was the case. So that's the big problem. It's got a real whitewashing problem. And it's shocking that in 2025, anybody would still be whitewashing something. I don't even know what to say. It's so weird. You're like, oh, have you been asleep for the past 10 years? If they'd made this movie before, Exodus and Gods of Egypt came out, then you'd be like, well, it was a different time in Hollywood. But you're like, I think audiences have made it super clear as to how this story is supposed to play out. All right, does anybody have any questions or comments about this story? Oh, hey, Bianca. Box office predictions for this movie? I think people, Saltburn really didn't do well at the box office. But when it went on streaming, when you could watch it on Prime Video for no extra cost, that's when it exploded. And I would say it's probably going to be the same thing. I think a lot of people are going to want to watch Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie be extremely inappropriate. But I don't know if they're going to pay for it. They'll wait to watch it for free. Nacho says Margot Robbie should follow Reese Witherspoon's career. Hot damn, is that a great suggestion? You did it. You found her spirit animal. We've talked about actors following the career paths of previous actors to find their way and what roles to accept. And you're right, Barbie was her Legally Blonde. And Reese Witherspoon got her Oscar for June Carter. Also, Grace Kelly, who got her Oscar for a similar role, The Country Girl, where she played the much beleaguered wife of someone, Bing Crosby of all people, who was an alcoholic. Wow, what a good idea. Yes, she should be following Reese Witherspoon and Grace Kelly. Those would be excellent people for her to think of and who to follow. She should do a thriller. She should cast herself as a Hitchcock blonde. I mean, she'd make so much money. That's what she should be doing. Good job, Nacho. Let's see here. Moot says, I feel like there are classic or period novels that have the premise they're going for. They could have taken a spicy book. Oh, that's a great point. Another great point, Moot. Who is that author? I read his work. D.H. Lawrence, is that the one who was banned a lot back in the day? There is an old writer, like a classic novelist, who wrote like really inappropriate stuff. I remember reading it in high school being like, whoa, am I supposed to be reading this? Maybe it was college. But yeah, and that would be a great person to do it. And then it would be, you'd have the intellectualism of, oh, well, this is what the author intended. But they were too prude back then to do it. So we can now totally do it. Let's see here. That's right, Oliver. It does look like it's trying very, very hard. Oh, D.H. Lawrence, I guessed correctly. Huzzah! Hello, I'm so happy. I'm so proud of myself. Okay. Yeah, D.H. Lawrence, boy. You want to read some ye old scandalous work. There you go. Let's see here. Pi says there's literally an Indian actor named Shahzad Latif who's in this movie that could have played Heathcliff, but instead he's playing the villain. Yeah, I saw that tweet that the people of color in the movie were being mean to Heathcliff. That's like, if that's true, it's gonna tank. As Lloyd just said. Reese says a lot of directors intentionally choose not to have authentic, diverse representation in their films, and as someone of color, Reese notices. What I think is the most interesting is when people go back and they correct the perception of what these time periods were like. I find it fascinating that early America, before the Pilgrims, had such a diverse group of people there. You know, the first person killed in the Revolutionary War, American Revolutionary War, was a black man. I believe a free black man. And so, he cared enough to be there. You know, he wasn't like, well, I don't care if America gets free. You know, I mean, history does a great disservice in that regard. Angeliana says that the Valentine's Day date is a good one. I would agree with that. I do think Valentine's Day, if you're going to release this movie at any time, I guess go for 50 Shades of Grey, right? No, Elise, she should not marry Prince. Or actually, Margot Robbie's already married, and she has a lovely son. But Grace Kelly actually really regretted that marriage. That was a horrible situation. She had to pay him $4 million to get married. Can you believe it? Just when you think everything's great for some people. Let's see here. Steven says Emma's image was the charming girl next door, so her doing Poor Things had a very different tone to awards voters. I think she already shed that by the time she did La La Land and The Favorite. Let's see. And Oliver says, boy, Margot sure does have questionable taste in roles that she chooses for herself. I've been saying that forever. And I'm sad. I thought maybe with Barbie she turned a corner. And then Anna says, this film just seems, hey Anna, just seems disinterested in the themes that give the book identity. That's the big issue here and why people are appalled. Also, what differentiates it from Lanthimos' adaptation of Poor Things, which I'm guessing was respectful of what it's supposed to be about. That's very interesting. Yeah. I mean, they're not people who care about the book are going to be against this movie. Who cares if Netflix made an adaptation that nobody saw? I'm still going in there and doing it. Franco says, I just read the novel only because they were adapting it. Did not sign up for this. You also read Sense and Sensibility. Well, Franco, I'm glad Hollywood is getting you to expand your horizons. All right, we got one more story. We have one more story. All right, we got to do the one more story. Okay. All righty. That's right, we still have one more story, and it's almost an hour already. All right, this one, well, I do have a lot to say. All right, so story number 3. Boom, baby. Whew. I promised to go through this quickly to get to the Q&A. So, yeah, Paramount. Woohoo, Paramount. They're busy over there. So, here's David Ellison, son of Larry Ellison, brother of Megan Ellison. of the Oracle fortune. They paid like $1 billion for Paramount, and they're sticking Skydance on the name. So Paramount, just like we always used to hear about Viacom, now you're going to hear Skydance all the time, which is funny because they dropped Viacom because they thought there was brand confusion. So you're like, is it Skydance or is it Paramount? If you bought Paramount, just call it Paramount. I don't think Skydance has a lot of name recognition, but damn it, they paid for it, I guess. All right, now, again, the optics on this continue to not be great. I'm sure that in the next week or so, or at least in the next month, we will be talking about significant layoffs at Paramount. They are planning, and they said the cuts will be just once. They said they're not going to do months and months of layoffs, but they said they're going to do one round, and it will be deep and painful. So as if the job market needs any more bodies on it. I mean, it's really bad right now, particularly in Hollywood. And I don't know where these people are going to get jobs because everybody's laying people off. So how did they get all these deals? With your salary. So it's really tough. All right, so they recently just paid tons of money for South Park, billions of dollars with a B. And, you know, Disney, of course, laid out this kind of cash for Pixar, Marvel, and Star Wars, but it wasn't all at once. So you've got South Park, UFC, the Duffer Brothers. They already got deals, but we've got 3 more, baby, that we're going to discuss right now. I will say, Paramount hasn't had this aggressive a slate in a very, very long time. All right, so, ka-ching! They just got a deal for Call of Duty. Call of Duty. I always think of the Wreck-It Ralph joke. Now, I remember a little project from Microsoft called Halo, which also was at Paramount and was PU awful. Everybody was really unhappy with this adaptation. It was not The Last of Us. It was not. So I'm a little bit concerned about them taking on Call of Duty, but we'll see if they are able to do something well with it. Do something good. All right, so movies and streaming. So part of the sexiness of the deal is that Paramount, of course, has a movie studio and a streaming service with Paramount Plus. So they feel they can use Call of Duty anywhere they want. You know, the focus off the bat is going to be a big, splashy blockbuster movie. However, they're saying they're planning to do quite a bit with this. And that really points to the scope of the franchise. Now, Call of Duty is about you getting to play in a military group and go on a mission. But the great thing about it is that war, sadly, has been around for a very long time. So they have games in all different types of arenas. They have modern warfare. They have games that play out different wars in the past. They have spies. They have different units within the military. And so there is a lot of stuff you can do. And when you think of the success of like Band of Brothers on HBO, they could do a lot of really good old-time stories as well, but slap the Call of Duty label on it, and I think it reaches a new audience in addition to the people who like those kinds of stories. So I wouldn't agree, at least, that it's DOA. I mean, I'm a little nervous about it, but I can see wanting to do the deal. I mean, it's a good... I even know what Call of Duty is, and I'm not a big video game player. So it's a good brand. I would have paid for this. I don't care, Bear says I'm giving them too much credit. Although then Robin says been playing since 2010. That's 15 years, baby. So let's see. So that's the first deal that they signed. All right, no details yet. They haven't hired a writer, or a director, or an actor. They even have zombies. Harris and John both pointed that out. They got all kinds of stuff over there. They got a lot of stuff. Are they toxic? I don't care, Bear. Well, at least hopefully their fans are engaged, and maybe that'll drive chatter online. Okay. There needs to be connectivity, says Jeremiah. That's an interesting point. Maybe they could have like a family, and, you know, the sons and daughters are always go into the military. And so you have the name, and you're like, oh, look, it's the father. Oh, look, it's the grandpa, oh, et cetera, et cetera. That could be a way to continue the continuation. I guess I'd ask the people who make the game. I'd be like, well, how do you see this connecting? Because that's one thing we've learned, you know. It's very important to ask the game makers instead of just yoink taking it away from them. Because Hollywood tried that, and it did not work. How are the games connected, Sean? Is it, as I said, through like a family? just waiting to see. Oh, but see, Jeremiah doesn't think there is connectivity. Interesting. All right, so that's one of the most recent deals they've signed. The next one they've done is Street Fighter. So they got Street Fighter, and everybody loves this poster that was released today. Player select. Let's get a little bit. This is a pixelization of the actors, the modern actors that are going to be in the movie. You can see Jason Momoa in there. One of you sent this to me and said it was pretty great. I agree. That's a very nice poster. They're a little light on star power down there. I recognize like 3 people. I don't even know who Noah Centino is. Oh, 4 people. I see David Desmalchi in there. Okay. All right. So they released this, all right, and they announced that they're going to have the date of October 16th, 2026, filmed for IMAX. Now, does that sound familiar to any of you? That is basically the exact same date a year later that Mortal Kombat 2 just gave up. Yikes. Right? So Mortal Kombat just moved out of October to May 2025, thank God. Like, it would be just a disaster if Street Fighter somehow got out in front of them. But now they're coming out. Mortal Kombat 2 comes out in May, and then now this will come out in October 16th, 2026. So that's nuts. That's really crazy. That's right. It's a year away. The movie's 1 year away for Street Fighter, and about 7 months for Mortal Kombat 2. But that's pretty crazy that they took the exact same date. Now, this is part of an overall deal that Paramount has just made with Legendary. It's a 3-year deal to distribute new movies. I'm not sure who the director is for Street Fighter. It's an Asian director, so I think that's very promising. Maybe it'll have some very cool fight sequences. But anyway, Legendary, of course, is working heavily with Warner Brothers. Batman back in the day, Dune, Minecraft, those are all Legendary. But for any new franchises that they launch going forward, like Street Fighter, they're going to Paramount. So maybe the fact that Warner Brothers already has Mortal Kombat helped this deal go through. But that's a great deal for Paramount to be working with Legendary. Legendary, of course, started out as a film finance company and then moved on to become a production company itself. All right, so that's the second deal. Then the third deal, this one was pretty surprising, and that's that Will Smith has signed a deal, a first look deal with Paramount. All right, so what that means is that first look deals mean that whenever he has an idea for a movie, he has to go to Paramount first. And Paramount has the right of first refusal. They either make it or they say you can shop it around somewhere else. Also, they will therefore give him an office or pay for his offices. So you can either be on the studio lot or not. And when he goes around and he's trying to get deals, when he's trying to buy property like a book or a screenplay, it helps that he has a deal with Paramount already. He's like, I can immediately go to Paramount and get this thing moving. So however, it's for Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith. They're working, both of them are part of this deal. Now they're going to make films that Will Smith, well, they have produced, like for instance, they produced Karate Kid for their son Jaden Smith back in the day, and that was very successful. However, the plan here is for Will Smith to star in the movies and for Jada Pinkett Smith to produce the movies. I'm really surprised anybody would sign this deal. So let's talk about if that's going to work post-slap. And let's do a poll, okay? I mean, the last Bad Boys did okay. Can Will Smith have a career post-slap? And then, sure he can. And then, maybe, but without Jada. And then maybe with Jada. And then nope. And by the way, again, anyone who's watching can vote in a poll. You don't have to be a member to vote in a poll. Yeah, she has produced stuff for Shaw. They produced the Karate Kid movie. So again, by the way, as I said, anyone who's watching, member or not, can vote in a poll. So here's the thing. I don't think Will Smith will ever go back to where he was. It's so tragic that, his downfall was on the night of what was supposed to be his highest achievement yet, which was winning the Oscar. I do think, though, that he still has an audience. I don't think he'll be the huge blockbuster draw, 4-quadrant draw that he once was. But I think that he can still make movies if you keep the budget down. I would say you got to have under $100 million budget. And then I think he could do well. So yeah, my big problem, though, is the continued relationship professionally and personally with Jada Pinkett Smith. Now, it's none of my business what he wants to do in his personal life. It's nobody's business. However, my biggest concern would be, are there any other problems that are going to come up? Right? Like, they've been quiet for a while, which I'm sure helped them get this deal. But I mean, like, before, it wasn't all gravy and going great before the slap. Remember that horrible thing where she made him cry on camera? Right? Like, it was really rough. I think she uses his embarrassment a lot for engagement. Like, I saw some pretty cringe, TikToks and videos that she made of him, where you're just like, Will, why are you allowing this to happen to you? So it's like, hey, if it's your relationship and you like it and you're happy, that's fine. But I think it becomes a problem when you start involving other people in it, when you use it as your brand. So that's the only thing that would make me very nervous. I'm like, what could happen next? I don't know what the particulars of the deal are. Maybe there's limited, maybe they're not that exposed on the Paramount side. They're like, if you come up with a great idea for a movie, we'll make it. Maybe that's what it is. But we'll see what happens. We'll see. I said before, I think there's this crazy phenomenon. Johnny Depp, Ryan Reynolds, Will Smith, with these guys having their careers at least dinged by their spouses. It's just really, it's weird that it would happen more than once, much less more than twice. So we'll see. So what do you got? Let me close the poll. Let me see here. Okay. All right. Can Will Smith have a career post-slap? 39% of you say sure he can. That's very promising for him. Hold on. 36% say sure, but without Jada. 19% say no way. And then only 5% say maybe with Jada. Yeah, okay, all right. So I think if he was going to lose Jada, he'd be in better shape. But, that's obviously, we can't say anything about that because that's his personal partner in life. But I will say that I think that as is, working with Jada, he has a significantly smaller audience. He has 40% of his audience. And so, again, I would make Will Smith movies as long as he keeps that budget under $100 million. That's what I would agree to. I'd be like, if you could make a movie for under 75 or 80, I'd really be happy. And then I think it would be worth the risk because Bad Boys did so well. But, Jada Pinkett Smith had nothing to do with Bad Boys. Like, that's another concern. Is Jada Pinkett Smith going to be, if she's the producer of these movies, is she going to be on the ad campaign? Is she going to be doing interviews for the films? That makes me really nervous. If I produce a movie with them, are they going to be going around doing press together? And by the way, I thought she was great on Gotham when she played Fishes, whatever, She was great. I was like, she's really good. She doesn't get enough credit for her acting. But it's gone downhill considerably since then. All right, so any questions or comments about this? About the Paramount situation overall? Kay Walton, producers usually are not on ad campaigns unless they want to be. And I think Jada Pinkett Smith really likes the spotlight. So I think that she would make herself in the interviews. I think she gave an interview once where she said she didn't love Will Smith and tried to backed out of the wedding. And you're like, my God, why would you tell anybody this? J.A. says, hey, Grace, I wanted to use my chat to share my excitement about seeing Chun-Li done right. She's your favorite character and like the Batman of fighting games. That's a Street Fighter character, right? I hope she is done right. Mute, that's an interesting theory about, the public not liking to be played for a fool. That's, and you bring up, I'm not familiar with the Halle Bailey situation, although I have noticed that she seems to have not be where she didn't have the takeoff as you would expect post Little Mermaid. And she was excellent in that movie. Away says, Call of Duty is definitely not famous for its story, so what would the movies even be about? Enter Hollywood. Josh says he's been teasing I Am Legend 2, Hancock 2, and I, Robot 2. Well, are any of those movies Paramount? I think some of them are. Those he could do. And then Oliver says, Halo was DOA, literally the biggest video game ever, and they waited way too long to adapt that property. No one cared by then. That's true, but Call of Duty, I think, is still popular. So that's an important factor. I was looking up the games, and they just released one, and they have another one coming out in November. And I think sometimes I check out how online players are doing. I want to see if I go to Stream database, and I see how the games are doing. I love a good chart for any industry. And I always see Call of Duty at the top. Call of Duty. Let me see what's up there right now. Oh, I don't see a Call of Duty up here. Let me see if I can get this a good chart. It's really hard to see it, but it's really interesting. If you ever want to see what games people are playing, if you go to streamdatabase.com, Counter-Strike 2 is first. Then, Marvel Rivals is always doing extremely well. It's very interesting. Tom Clancy. It's just interesting to see what people are playing. Is Counter-Strike Call of Duty? No. Oh, there it is. It's number 27. So that's pretty interesting. I think the game came out a while ago. All right, I think we can do the Q&A. We're over on the time. Sorry about that. It was my rant at the beginning. All right. All right, 10 minutes Q&A. What's GAO? Eminem92 says, hey Grace, what's your advice on mean comments? My friend is a content creator and has lovely audiences, but he fixates on random cruel comments. Oh, just get rid of them. I think of it like a garden. You wouldn't let weeds grow rampant in your garden, right? And also, I think it can feel very personal when you get mean comments. Just tell your friend that everybody gets them. So it's not personal. Darker, I am looking at award season. I'm planning to make a video. I just have a lot, it's just a lot going on, but it's on my to-do list. Oh, that's right, Rob. And the next Call of Duty is releasing in November. So that could maybe have it shoot up the charts there. Pi says, I'm glad you looked that up, Pi, and that what you said about that actor and the villain is correct. Let's see here. Insomnimat says, hi, Grace, much love. What do you think of my Wonder Woman pitch? Cersei, main villain, twisting Cheetah's friendship. Well, how would you set up the Cheetah friendship? I think that would take too long, maybe, right? I like Cersei. I think she's a great character. But, I got to tell you, I think you're better off if you want to just play around, that's fine. But, you know, for pitches, they want you to pitch original ideas because you can't pitch them. You can't. I did get Gen V screeners, Niall. But you can't pitch them story ideas for their own content because they can't read it or else you might sue them. Real Life Quinn says, if not Batman, who else could Nate Mann play? He is Batman, so he must play Batman. I don't really care about. I'm not a big Nate Mann fan. I just think he looks like Batman. Hey, Seuss, I haven't heard anything about the Scream 7 trailer, but I would think it would come out in front of Conjuring, right? Nacho, I thought Caught Stealing was good. I mean, I didn't love it, but I thought it was better than it looked in the trailer. I wouldn't rush out to the theater to see it, but if you're looking for something to watch on streaming down the line, I think you could definitely click on that and you would be happy. Nina says, hi Grace, when do you think we'll get the first teaser trailer for Supergirl? Well, that's a June release, so probably towards December. You know, that's mid to late June and early July, and that's what they released a trailer for Superman in December. So probably around December or maybe the Super Bowl if they, you know, because it's not James Gunn's own movie. So we'll see how he decides to promote it. But, you know, the end of the year. No, Reese, I don't cover film festivals. So I'm not going to be covering New York Film Festival. Clayton, I am a New Yorker. Thanks for asking. Matthew says, Xenomorph and Death Angel from A Quiet Place. Who wins? I think the Xenomorph, right? Because weren't they overly sound? I don't know. The Death Angel has a wider, longer reach, if I know my fighting strategies. And the longer the reach, he can touch the Xenomorph before the Xenomorph can touch him. So maybe the Death Angel wins. Unless the Xenomorph goes kamikaze and just acid bloods him. Chelsea, I'm so glad you got gifted a membership. That's so wonderful. It's so nice to hear from you. And I'm glad that you must be very late in Australia. Thanks for staying up. Oh, let's see here. Juan says, new color for me. Ah, yes, green. Also, thanks for liking the tweet on Alien and My Parents. What do you think of the Spanish title? I'm sorry that your parents aren't able to watch it. I hope Conjuring 4 does well this weekend. We'll see what the demographic breakdown is. Oh, Andre says, what are your thoughts on Lady Gaga's cameo on Wednesday? I thought it was really, really small. I mean, she did a nice job, but it was really, really small. I mean, I think what really made Wednesday season 2 for me was the Enid and Wednesday, the second half was the Wednesday and Enid relationship, which I see them Kurosamiing potentially. I see it headed in that direction. And then also I thought the stuff with Thing was mesmerizing. I never saw it coming and it was amazing. Pie, I don't think people care as much about Marvel whitewashing Doctor Doom because it's not a classic novel. And the fans just don't care as much, you know? I think in the comics, comic books don't really draw things accurately as to what they're supposed. So I think people it's just different audiences. Isaac says, what did you think about the 28 Years Later sequel trailer? It looks like torture porn, maybe. I'm a little nervous about that with the stuff with the Jimmies. I think, I really like Ralph Fiennes in this performance, but I just feel the movie's lost its heat. Or the franchise. Hero Creator says, hi Grace, I have a few creative ideas which I hope one day I can bring towards people's screens. Do you have any advice on how to get started? Well, I don't know what you're trying to do, but I guess I would say is you'd be surprised how long it takes to do anything. So don't wait to get started because it takes a really long time. Like, it just takes forever. So, Juan Gabriel, you're saying Super Bowl for Supergirl, although I'm reminded of the fact that Warner Brothers doesn't want to pay for a Super Bowl spot, so probably not. Although, Juan, you're right. Taylor Swift's there, right? Although we don't know if the Kansas City Chiefs will make it to the Super Bowl. Zachary, you have made me feel better. Thank you very much. Also, I've just made peace with not being able to cover Wednesday Season 2, Part 2, and I just have to deal with it. I'm not ruining Wednesday Season 2, Part 2. Let's see here. I don't think that Spider-Man Brand New Day needs the Super Bowl, Ben 10. I think they could just release that trailer whenever they want to, and the world will just explode. They'll be so excited. Hey, Warren Peace, thank you. I'm glad you made it, Brian Loves Movies. Heather, as I said, again, I'm so sorry I won't be able to review it. But Wednesday Part 2, I thought was better than Part 1 exponentially. If they had released it as one season, I think it would have been as popular as it was the first time. I think that splitting it up into two halves was a horrible decision, which greatly hurt the franchise potentially. And I hope that they maybe learn that lesson going forward. I do not think splitting up things works. I think either you do week to week or you binge. I think these chunks is a really bad idea. Pi, are you saying recasting or pass the mantle? Because, you know, that's a big difference there. Theater Kid says, is there any good movies coming up worth watching before November? I hope Tron is good. I think The Smashing Machine looks excellent. That got very strong reviews out of Venice. So I'm very excited about that. Thanks for the heads up, Darker. We'll cover Nielsen on Sunday. All right. Okay, I better get going. And RPW says, hey, Grace, hope to cheer you up. I personally think covering Superman 2 was the right thing. A bit like the film, its reaction was a surprise, but I have faith in DC overall. Aw, that's very sweet of you. Kay Walton, I'm excited about One Battle After Another as well. In fact, I see it tomorrow. So that actually makes me lose a day. But, you know, it's getting to be award season, and so there's lots and lots of screenings. All right, everybody, see you soon. Thank you so much. And I have 2 videos still going up this week. Peacemaker tonight after the episode drops. And then in the morning, I'll put up my paper review for the paper because I already filmed it. All right, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye-bye. Bye-bye.